Words are by Elizabeth M. Strong. Today we celebrate a dream awakening. Today we worship with renewed hope in our hearts. Today we act on an audacity of hopes and dreams for the future. Today we begin the hard work for justice, equity, and compassion in all human relations, for today is a day like no other, and it is ours to shape with vision and action. Let us worship together and celebrate a dream awakening. And this is the lengthy bio I have. Don Morrison is the director of the Dakota Resource Council, and Waylon Hedegaard is the director of the AFL-CIO. I can add that Don is a longtime member of the congregation, former program chair for many, 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 many years, and Waylon's been with us before, and we consider him a good friend of the congregation as well. So I don't know exactly what they're doing, but hopefully they do, and I will turn the podium over to you folks.
Well, I've been looking forward to today for a long time. Since the program committee asked Waylon and I to do this, Waylon and I talk from time to time and have really good conversations about blue and green and a lot of other topics as well. Today we thought, well, we'll do that conversation and share that with you. We'll both make brief opening statements and then respond to each other and then have questions from y'all. One of the questions that I wanted to start with is, what is really in the way of saving the environment and making sure that all working people have a decent life? I wanted to start with a disclaimer, actually, and that I'm going to try, but probably not successfully, to avoid broad brushes, and I would encourage all of us to avoid too deep on broad brushes. Whether that be environmentalists or labor people or state and federal employees or different political parties or whatever the case may be. Because there's, or people who were at the camps in Standing Rock, and I could go on and on and on. But we should, there's a lot of different people in different kinds of categories, and wanted to, I'll try to be specific when I'm talking about some of those things. What I wanted to answer that question is what's really in the way. One of the things is what we see both nationally and here in North Dakota is polarization and the idea of what I've been calling a false choice. You're either for the environment or you're against the environment. You're either for oil or you're against oil. You can't be somewhere reasonable with common sense. And it's okay to be on one of those two ends. It's okay to be there as well. But just a couple examples of like Dakota Resource Council members, many of which, I'd say a majority, don't call themselves environmentalists. You know, that's not a really good word in this state. And how do our members get there? You know, if they're members of DRC for a while, they get to the idea that, well, maybe I am. They come to Dakota Resource Council because an oil company destroyed their land. Now, oil companies don't care your political persuasion or where you sit. They are doing what they're doing. And so we try to work with folks to try to protect, to try to stop the oil spills, to try to make sure the oil pads are put in the right place, that the pipelines are built right, and on and on and on. But asking some of those common sense questions when we're working with government officials, oh, you're just radical environmentalists. If you raise some questions about, can we do this a little bit better, then you become a radical environmentalist. And that is one of the things that is certainly gets in the way. I wanted to just really quickly just talk about three different issues that are going on where labor and in people who are focusing on the environment really do see eye to eye, or where there's places for agreement. One is reducing methane emissions in the energy industry. One of the things DRC did was take pictures of oil infrastructure, tanks, pipelines, other infrastructure, and these cameras could see and document the emissions coming off of this infrastructure. And well, how do we clean that up and how do we stop that? We need really good qualified workers who are paid a lot of money in order to do that. And so both when there's these rules that last year were the federal government approved, and then now currently the new administration is trying to get rid of, both labor and folks like us are trying to protect those rules so that not only is the environment protected, but also good jobs are made. Trade agreements. Basically, the trade agreements, in a nutshell, in some of the problems that arise from trade agreements are this little thing that is in most of the agreements that says if a corporation is going to lose profits, they can sue the country or the local community who put in that regulation. Sometimes it doesn't get that far. Sometimes it only gets to the point of public officials going, well, we can't do that because we have these trade agreements. So really good protections and things that are good for workers and things that are good for our air, water, and people don't last or don't get because these trade agreements, we're on the same side when it comes to trade agreements and giving our democracy over to corporations. And the last thing I wanted to just mention is CAFOs, which is confined animal feeding operations. And there's one proposed near Devil's Lake that is on about a mile from the shore of Devil's Lake, but many of the manure spreading fields are currently underwater or have been underwater in the last 4 years. And so that's really bad for the people who live there. It's bad for businesses. It's bad for, certainly it smells bad. But the other part of that is the working conditions in those CAFOs are some of the worst in this country. So we work together. And it shows the similarity of what I think, what is part of all of those? What values are there? One of those is, one of the major values is we have to work together as a community to solve those problems. Just saying, let the industry do it, isn't going to cut it. It's not going to fix that problem. It's part of the solution, absolutely. But just saying, well, let the industry fix it themselves, isn't going to help the workers, isn't going to help protect it. So certainly that's one of it. The other is
I can't help you, Don.
all right, you can't help me on that one. Oh, yes. The other is the opposition is the same. Pretty much in most of those cases, the folks on the other side of labor and the folks on the other side of those of us who care about are focusing on the environment, we're opposed by the same people. So there's a lot. I just wanted to bring up that there are a lot of people, and there are a lot of, let's begin with, we do have some things in common, but we also, and in our conversations together, Waylon is a really strong advocate for working people. And he doesn't waver, I don't waver, but we find common ground. We can still find common ground and look out for what we are advocating for. So I'll turn it over to Waylon for some opening remarks.
Sure, I'm not nearly that organized, and now I got to follow this. Okay. And I also obviously forgot to send in my bio. So my name is Waylon Hedegaard. I'm president of the North Dakota AFL-CIO. I've been for a couple years now, but I'm also a Boilermaker, and I've worked in the fossil fuel industry for 25 years. And that gives me what some people would say was a unique point of view and what other people would say would be a biased point of view. I'm not going to quibble with either of those. They're probably both true. I'm also a science major. I have a degree in biology. I've believed the science since I was 5 years old. Climate change is absolutely happening. It's absolutely us. There's just no doubt about this. To think that there's a giant conspiracy, which a huge amount of people in the fossil fuel industry do, to think there's a giant conspiracy that basically puts forward this science so we can somehow wreck business is about as sensible as believing the myth that there were 5,000 paid protesters down in Standing Rock. It is simply inconceivable. At that, I'd like to talk about this problem, how I see it. People in the United States particularly keep treating environmentalism and climate change like it's a strictly scientific issue. That we need to reduce carbon, that we need to reduce it by such amount, and we treat it by numbers. In reality, I think one of the reasons we have made so little progress on it is because we're treating it as a scientific issue instead of a sociological issue, which it has to be looked at as. You cannot factor people out of that equation or you will lose every time. And if I've talked about probably in this group before. I mean, one of the reasons Americans deny climate change more than any other people on earth is that when you look at it, our entire capitalistic system is based on that all of the burden of any change of any economic system is laid right on the backs of the workers who work in it. And so they're faced with a challenge of either, well, we can either believe in climate change and think that we're wrecking the world and our jobs are all going to end, or we can just not believe in it. And we can fight tooth and nail to keep those jobs that are probably going away sooner or later. And so we have this thing of denial. In any democracy, you have to get 51% of the voting public on your side to get things done. And in the United States, we've had a very hard time doing that with environmentalism, and in North Dakota in particular. And a huge reason is that I don't think we focus on the actual people and convincing them of the inevitable changes that are coming. So I would like to throw that out there. I'd also like to agree with Don, when I first started, I had a member, actually a union leader, come up and really chew me out for even associating with Don Morrison and the DRC. And this is before I got elected. And I'm like, we keep allowing ourselves to be separated by our minute differences instead of all the vast things we have in common. And I've made it very plain, there might be things that the DRC does that we can't support. It's fine. But the other 90% we certainly can, and we're going to work together on that. We don't throw away allies. That's senseless. This isn't a purity contest. This is getting things done. And whatever steps we have to do to get one step at a time, we're going to do. It's not going to be an easy thing. It's not going to be a simple thing. But we can get this done. And we can get this done focusing together. But it's going to be hard. If I want to say one more thing, it's this. There's so much messaging here that is kind of at issue, and we've talked about some of this. Don and I have talked about this a lot, and Liz and I. The other part of the thing is it's not only people are losing their job, but with some of the messaging that gets brought up. When we talk about, the anti-coal or the anti-oil messaging, I'm not saying that you're not saying the truth. What I'm saying is when it gets put in certain ways, you are basically telling the people who work in those industries that they're bad people. And that's the lesson that they get out of it. And their very first response is to say, no, I'm not. And you're full of it. And it is, over the last, let's be honest, 40 years, it has reinforced them into this myth that we can continue on and nothing ever has to change. It has basically pushed them into believing that more firmly now than ever. And contrary to all evidence, they believe this. And so thinking about that message and thinking about that, we keep saying that, if you read the internet, which I'm sure almost everybody in here does to some extent, there's so many implications that, fighting climate change will be easy. And it's not. I mean, this is probably going to be one of the most technically and politically challenging things we will ever do as a nation. This is like the World War III kind of thing that we have to do. But when I hear people talk about Elon Musk and Tesla batteries and the Tesla cars and how they're going to revolutionize everything. Part of me loves it and part of me cringes. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with Elon Musk. Don't tell him, he doesn't know. But part of me loves the science part of it and the technical aspects and the things that he's pushing. I love that. But the other part of me kind of cringes at, one, how he treats his employees. You know, he has labor violations in every factory. But two, how he doesn't even consider the economic and sociological implications of what those changes are going to do. It's just like, well, that's just too bad. And that's kind of a libertarian point of view. I have a lot of friends who think that, well, if we all just get solar panels and put Tesla batteries in our house, this will all solve the problem. And that's a libertarian solution to the problem. Basically, that's what the upper classes can do. They can afford to put that in. But people living in small houses on fixed income simply can't. And if everybody else pulls off the grid, because that's what kind of that means, you pull off the electrical grid, you basically leave the system for the poorest of the people to support. And that is, in no way could I ever accept that. It has to be an all of us or none of us kind of activity. And I don't think we're going to succeed unless we really start looking at it that way. So Don and I both agree. We can't afford to throw away anybody in this battle. We have to get as many people as possible on our side. And we have to do it in such a way that doesn't alienate others. And that's not going to be easy. So, and we actually have no format for this. So I don't know if we're going to go back and forth with questions or questions from the audience, but.
Well, I'd like maybe just one more a response to that. And actually, I'm going to throw my notes away, and because they're kind of going there anyway. Is the in conversations and that we've had, and that just having people who disagree with each other in our own processes, and to give some another point of view. And Waylon had participated in one of DRC's conversations with some of our members, and you know, in looking at climate change and how we can fix this, we'll just have, you know, workers find them jobs in the solar and making wind propellers. That's pretty simple, right? Waylon was able to very clearly tell us that's not going to work. In Germany, however, because the idea is in Germany, well, Germany is almost all transitioned to renewable energy from the fossil fuel energy. Well, if Germany can do it, why can't we? Well, the Germans have a different landscape in which to participate in this transition. Everybody in Germany has health care. If you lose your health care because you have had collective bargaining agreements with your employer in this country, and you move to another industry, which the renewable manufacturing industry is not unionized, you don't have health care. So, and I could talk for hours on all the other kinds of things that maybe Germany has that makes that transition not have the burden fall on the workers. But that is like, okay, folks, we have a problem. And it also, one of the reasons I want to bring that up is we have a bigger problem. And it is about values and what we value and what kind of society do we want and how do we solve these problems. Maybe we have to work together, because nobody can solve some of these problems with just one constituency or one group at a time.
Sure. He kind of told my side of the story, so.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind furthering that a little bit more. I mean, not only does Germany have health care, but they have pension guarantees. They have work guarantees. They have wage guarantees. So if you look at the German economic system for changing, it's a system pretty much based in concrete. You can shift it from one side to the other and it's not going to collapse. In the United States, and particularly in North Dakota, where workers have way fewer rights than even, you know, in general, all these negotiated contracts are huge. They're houses of cards. You know, the wages and the benefits and that on these union jobs in coal-fired power plants and the oil industry and all the rest, they're a big house of cards that when you move that to another industry, it is all going to collapse, because the industry itself is going to make sure it collapses. The bosses and the owners and the corporations are going to use that. If we could actually guarantee that people could move from one to the other and keep their union contracts into the wind, we would have way less opposition. But the fact that somebody's going to go from a job that they have gotten, 20 years of training or 20 years of experience and training in, that pays $40 an hour with benefits, down to a job that has no benefits or light benefits and pays $20 an hour, is pretty hard to convince somebody that that's a good thing. And again, reality is climate change is here and we are changing. The coal-fired power plants, even if, honestly, even if we stopped and did nothing, they're going to be less every year because economically they are no longer the most feasible thing. They're more feasible right now because, basically they're paid off. But they're barely feasible. And as they wear out, they are not going to be replaced right now. We've got too many other options. So these jobs are leaving anyway. But trying to convince the people that it's not the environmental movement that's killing them is a hard thing.
All right.
Oh, and I also want to say,
okay.
you talked about, we do agree. DRC would like better pipelines. We would like better. Obviously, we build our entire thing on quality. I mean, it's abhorrent, some of the things that we can slap into the ground or build above ground in this state without almost any regulations whatsoever. The CAFO thing, not only the treatment of animals, but the general treatment of workers in any of those situations is terrible. And your third one was trade agreements. Oh, yeah, we were allied firmly. So, yeah, sometimes we got to be secretly, but we secretly hold hands.
I saw a great quote in a paper today, and I've been looking forward to this program all week because of the topic, because I think this is exactly what the issue is the narrative, is controlling the narrative. And the quote I saw, I don't remember which of the columnists it's in the Dakota section. It's the one with the opinions, but it's that in reference to Donald Trump, is that he gets the facts wrong, but he's got the myth right in speaking. And you mentioned that earlier. You're talking about the myth and how people are so divided right now, and it doesn't matter anymore. We're using your political affiliation as your identity, and it doesn't matter anymore. People are ignoring facts. I'd like to hear some more on that.
That comes, there's a whole bunch of things that come to mind, and part is, and I'm going to go straight to the divide and conquer of what's happening, and part of the reason why we're polarized is that false choice of either for or against. That means that when people try to participate in a reasonable, common sense way, they get you get put in one camp or the other, whether you want to be there or not. Now, that means that the people who are in power and who have the wealth and the power to run the show and make the policies, that works really well for them. Because then Waylon and I aren't supposed to talk to each other. And we're not supposed to talk to our neighbors or our friends or the other people in our congregations because, they're the enemy. And what we really need to be thinking about is how do we have common ground? Who really is, or why is it so incredibly difficult in this country to do something about changing our environmental regulations and moving forward environmentally? And thinking about, and another question of what has happened to for workers since the early 1970s. What's happened to that? The status of workers, the income, it's plummeted. And it's for the same reason that the difference between what happened in the 1970s in coal in North Dakota, when coal in the mid-70s, the coal industry proposed over 60 coal-fired electrical generating plants in this state. We had a governor who said, we're going to share our coal, got good jobs, our country needs the energy. But when the landscape is quiet again and all that noisy equipment is gone, the land is going to be just as good as it is now. And so environment and workers and farmers were all part of that mix. This time, and it didn't matter what public official, I don't know of any statewide public official in the last 8 years in the Bakken oil boom who wasn't really perturbed that we started out the Bakken oil boom at 2,000 wells. And in 5 or 6 years, we got to 10, 12,000 wells. They said they were really upset that we weren't at 60. We need to get to 60 really fast. So it was a total change in how these kinds of problems are attacked. And one of the reasons that they were able to do that is the kinds of organizations that I work with and Waylon works with and a lot of you work with in other fields are very weak. We don't have the kind of institutions that we used to have that would bring people together to have the people's voice in the process.
But one of the things that really sticks in my mind, was a quote kind of over on the side of this material from Francis Kissling, who's been very involved over many, many years in the organization Catholics for Reproductive Freedom or Free Choice. I can't remember the name exactly. Anyway, her first statement in this quote was, "Change only happens in the margins." And I would really like to congratulate and honor Don and Waylon for their work on the margins, because that's what's going to bring us to any kind of a resolution, which we may or may not see in our lifetime, but hopefully our children will.
Hopefully.